Did you order some good news? I got you, Poppy. So the biggest piece of good news is the UAE and Israel peace deal and the normalization of relations there. In all honesty, you can have 10,000 different opinions about Israel and about the Middle East and about Palestine, and it's such a complicated and crazy issue. But honestly, anything that has peace in the name is good news to me, so I'm just going to take it and run with it. So this is going under good news. And this deal has been in the works for quite a while now, going back to, I think, 2018, where a couple of diplomats were just eating spaghetti in some cafe in Washington, D.C., and just started talking about this sort of thing. And it evolved into a full normalization of relations, which is pretty incredible to see. And looking at this in a more broader context, the fact that the UAE and Israel normalize relations, it could have cascading effects on other countries in that region. Since UAE is a very prominent country and very influential, it could have like a domino effect where other countries may also seek to normalize relations with Israel, mainly Saudi Arabia, which is the biggest player in all this. So this deal could be a big stepping stone in having more normalized relations, more peace in that whole region, which is, it's like I said, it's a very complicated issue, but it's a positive in general. And all right, my anti-vaxxers, it's time for your worst of the week because we have a vaccine for COVID coming pretty fast. There are several companies and universities all over the world that have vaccine candidates that are now undergoing clinical testing, which is the biggest stage in testing. And it's looking like we may have a vaccine by the end of the year or at least early next year. And honestly, that is just incredible. And the people that developed these vaccines deserve so much credit for how fast they were able to go through this vaccine process. Now, the speed that this vaccine was developed does cause some complications, however, because a lot of people are very skeptical of a vaccine that was only developed in a year. Most vaccines take decades and decades to develop, and the fact that one vaccine was developed in under a year is ridiculous. So you're not a flat earther, anti-vaxxer Facebook user if you are skeptical about this vaccine. It is completely reasonable to be skeptical about a vaccine that was developed in 1/10 of a time that a usual vaccine takes. But I'm going to tell you some things that will hopefully ease your mind a little bit about this vaccine. The reason this vaccine is being developed so quickly is because no other vaccine in history has had this much focus on it in such a little amount of time. There are hundreds of firms, organizations, universities, and companies all around the world basically devoting all of their resources just to a COVID-19 vaccine. And a lot of them are working together, and it's never really happened before for any other vaccine. Another thing to consider is that all of the recent innovations in technology and methodologies for developing vaccines are being used and applied in development for this COVID-19 vaccine. There is a lot more resources available to scientists now who are researching a vaccine than to the people that were researching the polio vaccine, for example. So just those increases in modern science is going to expedite any vaccine's process. And lastly, which is probably the most important factor, is that Daddy Big Bucks is here because there has never been this much money poured into a vaccine from federal governments, ever. The US federal government has this plan called Operation Warp Speed, which is basically just the government dumping billions and billions of dollars into private companies, private pharmaceutical companies, so that they can research vaccine candidates. And this has never really happened before to this magnitude. This is a ton of money being poured into these independent private companies, which is giving them a lot more resources so that they can faster develop a vaccine. Companies like Moderna and Novavax, which I'm sure you've heard of, the reason their stocks have shot up like 500% and the reason why they are developing vaccine candidates so quickly is because they are literally getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government. This allows them to work nonstop around the clock in the most efficient way as possible in order to research a vaccine. And like I said, this has never really happened before. So I'm not telling you that you should run out and grab Putin's vaccine that was just made in his kitchen one afternoon. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that the reason this vaccine is being developed is not because they are cutting corners. It's mainly because there is so many resources being put towards this COVID-19 vaccine. So if a vaccine comes out and it has gone through all the proper testing, it is being approved by organizations like the CDC and the World Health Organization, the chances are that the vaccine is just as safe as any other vaccine you would get. I believe Dr. Fauci said that if around 75 to 85% of Americans get the vaccine, then we will have effectually beaten the pandemic, that we will have developed herd immunity and we could basically move on with our lives as normal. So what I'm saying is if all of these organizations say it's safe, if it has gone through the proper clinical trials, the vaccine is more than likely safe and you should probably get it. But still, your skepticism is valid. Anyways, that's the good news for today. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and more importantly, please be safe and have a good day. See ya.